The rain came down hard that evening, the kind that soaks through your clothes in seconds. Maylin pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it didn't help much. The jacket had belonged to her mother and was too big for her small frame. Still, she wouldn't have traded it for anything. She stood across the street from Bellini's, one of the fanciest restaurants in town. Through the large windows, she could see people laughing, eating, and drinking wine. The warm golden light spilling out looked like something from another world. In the corner sat a beautiful grand piano, currently empty. Maylin hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her stomach had gone from painful growling to a strange hollow feeling that somehow felt worse. She had exactly 27 cents in her pocket, not nearly enough for food, but she did have something else. "Just try," she whispered to herself, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "The worst they can say is no." Taking a deep breath, she crossed the street and pushed open the heavy wooden door of the restaurant. Warmth hit her face along with the smell of food that made her dizzy with hunger. Several heads turned to look at her. A skinny teenage girl with wet hair plastered to her face, worn-out sneakers leaving small puddles on the polished floor. A tall man in a black suit approached her with a frown. His name tag read Thomas Manager. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice making it clear that he doubted he could. Maylin swallowed hard. I was wondering if I could play your piano." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The manager's eyebrows went up. "I'm sorry, but the piano is for our scheduled entertainment only. If you're looking for the shelter, it's 3 blocks. In exchange for food," Maylin blurted out. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I can play it very well. Just for a few minutes in exchange for something to eat, please." By now, several diners at nearby tables were watching. A woman in an expensive dress leaned toward her companion and whispered something. They both laughed quietly, looking at Maylin's dripping clothes. "This isn't that kind of establishment," Thomas said firmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "What's happening here, Thomas?" A woman had appeared from the back of the restaurant. She was in her 50s with short salt and pepper hair and a sharp gaze. Her name tag identified her as Diane, the owner. "This young lady was just leaving," Thomas began. "I asked to play the piano in exchange for food," Maylin said, looking directly at Diane. Something told her this was her only chance. "Just one song. If you don't like it, I'll go." Diane studied her for a long moment. More people were watching now. Some looked uncomfortable, others amused, like they were about to see some free entertainment, but not the kind Maylin intended. "How old are you?" Diane asked. 17. "Where are your parents?" Maylin looked down. "My dad left when I was little. My mom died 3 months ago. Cancer." She didn't mention the eviction notice that had come 2 weeks after the funeral, or the nights spent on friends' couches until she ran out of friends willing to help. Some things were too heavy to share with strangers. Diane's expression softened slightly. She glanced at the piano, then back at Maylin's face. "One song," she said finally. Thomas looked like he wanted to object, but Diane silenced him with a look. She gestured toward the piano. "After that, we'll talk." Maylin felt everyone's eyes on her as she made her way to the piano. Her heart pounded so hard she thought others might hear it. The snickering from some tables grew louder. She heard someone whisper, "This should be good," in a tone that suggested they expected quite the opposite. The piano bench felt cool and solid as she sat down. It was a beautiful instrument, far nicer than the old upright she and her mother had owned before they had to sell it to pay for medications. Maylin took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Her fingers remembered what to do before her mind did. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. The piece had been her mother's favorite. They had played it together countless times, her mother guiding her hands when she was very young. Then later listening with tears in her eyes as Maylin mastered it on her own. "Music is the language of the soul," her mother used to say. "When words fail, music speaks." Now, hungry and alone in a room full of strangers, Maylin spoke the only language that still made sense to her. Something shifted in the restaurant. The murmurs and snickering faded away. Silverware stopped clinking against plates. Even the kitchen seemed to grow quieter. The music filled the space, transforming it. Maylin played with her eyes closed, letting her fingers find their way. She thought of her mother, of their small apartment filled with music, of the lessons where her mother would correct her posture or praise a well-executed passage. She thought of the last time she had played for her mother in the hospital room, on a small keyboard a kind nurse had found for them. As the final notes faded away, Maylene opened her eyes. The restaurant was completely silent. She turned slightly on the bench and was startled by what she saw. Every face was turned toward her. A woman at a nearby table was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. An older man sat with his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, seemingly forgotten. Thomas, the manager, stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Diane moved first. She walked slowly to the piano, her expression unreadable. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked quietly. "My mother taught me," Maylene answered. "She was a piano teacher, before she got sick." "And where are you staying now?" Maylene hesitated. "Different places." Understanding dawned in Diane's eyes. "You're homeless." It was the first time anyone had said it out loud, and Maylene flinched slightly at the word. But she nodded. A man stood up from one of the tables. He was well-dressed, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Young lady," he said, "I was at the symphony last weekend. I've heard professional pianists who couldn't play with half the feeling you just showed." Others began to speak up. "That was beautiful. I've never heard anything like it." "Play something else." Diane raised a hand and the restaurant quieted again. She turned to Thomas. "Bring her whatever she wants from the kitchen. A full meal." Then to Maylene she said, "Come with me after you eat. We need to talk." 30 minutes later, Maylene sat in Diane's office, her stomach pleasantly full for the first time in days. She had tried to eat slowly, to be polite, but hunger had won out. Now she felt almost dizzy with the sudden influx of food and the events of the evening. Diane sat across from her, hands folded on her desk. "I have a proposal for you," she said. "We have live piano music on Friday and Saturday nights. Our regular pianist just moved to another state. The position pays $200 a night plus meals." Maylene blinked, certain she had misheard. "You're offering me a job?" "Yes. And there's a small room upstairs where our last pianist sometimes stayed. It's nothing fancy, but it has a bed and a private bathroom. You can use it until you find something better." The kindness was so unexpected that Maylene found herself fighting tears. "Why would you do this for me?" "You don't even know me." Diane was quiet for a moment. 25 years ago, I was not much older than you, running from an abusive relationship with nothing but the clothes on my back. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most." She smiled slightly. "Besides, that was the best piano playing this restaurant has ever heard. I'd be a fool to let you walk out that door. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Diane replied, "and then tell me your full name so I can put you on the payroll." "Maylene Chang," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Well, Maylene Chang," Diane said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Bellini's." As they shook hands, Maylene thought about how quickly life could change. This morning she had been huddled in a bus station, wondering where her next meal would come from. Now she had a job, a place to stay, and something that felt dangerously like hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight the hunger was gone, and somewhere she felt her mother smiling. A week had passed since Maylene's life-changing night at Bellini's. The small room above the restaurant wasn't much, just a bed, dresser, tiny bathroom, and a window overlooking the street below. But to her it felt like a palace. Having a door that locked, a shower with hot water, and a bed that wasn't a park bench or bus station seat was more luxury than she'd known in months. Tonight was her third performance at the restaurant. Word had spread quickly about the amazing young pianist, and Bellini's was packed. As Maylene made her way down the narrow staircase that led from her room to the back of the restaurant, she could hear the buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. Diane met her by the kitchen door. "Full house tonight," she said with a smile. "There are even people who called saying they're coming just to hear you play." Maylene's stomach tightened with nervousness. "Really? Really? And there's something else." Diane hesitated. "A reporter from the local paper is here. He wants to do a story on you." "On me? Why?" Diane gave her a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. "Because you're extraordinary, Maylene. It's not every day someone walks in off the street and plays like a concert pianist." Before Maylene could process this, Thomas appeared. "5 minutes until you're on," he said. His attitude toward her had completely changed since that first night. Now he treated her with a respect that sometimes made her uncomfortable, as if she were someone important. "I can't talk to a reporter," Maylene whispered to Diane. "What would I say?" Just tell the truth, Diane said gently. Or don't talk to him at all. It's completely up to you. As Mei Lin approached the piano, she felt eyes following her. The beautiful black grand piano gleamed under the soft lighting. It was much nicer than anything she and her mother had ever been able to afford. Each time she played it, she felt like she was being given a precious gift. She sat down at the bench and took a deep breath. The room quieted as people noticed she was ready to begin. For a moment, the silence was almost overwhelming. Then her fingers found the keys and everything else fell away. She started with a piece by Debussy, Clair de Lune. It was delicate and dreamy, building slowly like moonlight spreading across a dark room. As she played, she remembered how her mother would stand behind her, gently correcting her posture. Music isn't just in your fingers, she would say. It's in your whole body, in how you breathe, how you sit. Mei Lin lost herself in the music, one piece flowing into another. She played for nearly an hour without pause. Chopin, Bach, Beethoven, and finally returning to her mother's favorite nocturne. When she finally stopped, the applause startled her. She had almost forgotten where she was, who she was playing for. As she stood and gave a small bow, she noticed a man in the back of the restaurant writing in a small notebook. The reporter, she guessed. She quickly looked away. After her performance, several people stopped her to offer compliments. An older couple asked if she gave lessons. A young man about her age stammered through, telling her it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Mei Lin thanked them all politely but felt a wave of relief when she was finally able to escape to the kitchen. She was helping herself to a plate of food when the back door opened. Diane walked in with an older man Mei Lin had never seen before. He was tall and thin with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Something about his careful posture made Mei Lin think he must be a musician himself. Mei Lin, this is Professor Chen, Diane said. He teaches at the conservatory downtown. No relation, I assume? The professor said with a small smile, gesturing between their shared last name. His voice was gentle, with a slight accent that reminded Mei Lin of her grandfather. No, sir, Mei Lin replied softly. Professor Chen heard about you from his niece, who was here last night, Diane explained. He came specially to hear you play. The professor studied her with kind but penetrating eyes. Your technique is extraordinary for someone so young. Where did you train? My mother taught me, Mei Lin said. She studied at the Shanghai Conservatory before coming to America. Something flickered in the professor's eyes.
What was your mother's name?
Lina Chang. The professor's eyebrows shot up. Lina Chang was your mother? She was a legend at the conservatory. I heard her play when I was a student there. He shook his head in wonder. Now I understand. The way you play the Chopin, it's so much like her style. Tears pricked at Mei Lin's eyes. It had been so long since she'd heard someone else speak of her mother, especially someone who had actually known her music. She stopped performing after she married my father and moved here, Mei Lin explained. She taught piano lessons from our home instead. Professor Chen nodded thoughtfully. And you're playing now, all self-taught through your mother? Yes, we practiced every day. Mei Lin didn't add that in the final months of her mother's illness. It was Mei Lin who had played for her, when her mother's hands became too weak to manage the keys. Remarkable, the professor murmured. He seemed to come to a decision. The conservatory has an open audition day next week for the new semester. Would you consider coming? There are scholarships available for exceptional talents. Mei Lin's heart raced. The conservatory was the most prestigious music school in the state. Before her mother got sick, they had talked about Mei Lin applying there someday. But that had seemed like a faraway dream, one that had died along with her mother. I don't have any formal training, she said hesitantly. I never had lessons from anyone but my mother. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you play. Professor Chen reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Think about it. Call me if you decide to come. After he left, Mei Lin sat at the small table in the kitchen, turning the card over in her hands. Diane sat across from her. You should do it, Diane said simply. I can't, Mei Lin replied. Even with a scholarship, how would I pay for books, supplies, everything else? And I'd have to quit working here if I was in school full-time. We'd figure it out, Diane said. You can keep your room as long as you need it and still play here on weekends. Her voice grew softer. Mei Lin, do you know how rare your gift is? Your mother clearly wanted this for you. She prepared you for it your whole life. Later that night, back in her small room, Maylene sat on the edge of her bed. She pulled out the one photo she had managed to keep with her through everything. Her mother sitting at their old piano, smiling at the camera. It was taken 2 years ago before the cancer, when her mother still looked strong and vibrant. "What should I do, Mom?" she whispered to the photo. The next morning, she was awakened by an insistent knocking at her door. She opened it to find Thomas, the manager, holding a newspaper. "You're on the front page," he said, thrusting the paper toward her. Sure enough, there she was, a photo of her playing the piano, head bent over the keys, completely absorbed in the music. The headline read, "Homeless teen piano prodigy discovers new life through music." Maylin scanned the article quickly. The reporter had talked to Diane and several restaurant patrons. They described her playing as transcendent and professional level. There was even a quote from a music teacher who had been dining there, saying her technique suggested years of classical training. At the end of the article was a line that made her heart skip. Chang currently performs nightly at Bellini's restaurant, where she has also found temporary housing after months of homelessness following her mother's death. "The phones are ringing off the hook," Thomas told her. "People wanting reservations, asking when you'll be playing. Diane wanted me to tell you there's no pressure, but we're booked solid for the next 2 weeks." That afternoon, Maylene called the number on Professor Chen's card. When he answered, she took a deep breath. "This is Maylin Chang," she said. "I'd like to audition for the conservatory." There was a pause on the other end, then what sounded like a pleased chuckle. "I was hoping you'd call. Can you be here tomorrow at 2? "Yes," she said, surprised at the steadiness in her voice. "I can." After hanging up, she went to the small dresser where she'd put the few belongings she still owned. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a folder containing her mother's favorite sheet music, the pieces they had played together countless times. As she looked through them, a small envelope fell out. It was addressed to her in her mother's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Maylene opened it. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before her mother died. "My dearest Maylene," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, but music remains. Don't let fear stop you from sharing your gift with the world. I have taught you everything I could, but there is still so much for you to learn. Your path forward may not be easy, but it is clear. Follow the music wherever it leads you. I will be listening. All my love, always, Mom." Tears slid down Maylene's face as she carefully folded the letter. Tomorrow she would audition for the conservatory. She would play her mother's favorite pieces. And wherever that led her, she would follow, one note at a time. The conservatory building looked like something from another century, with tall columns and wide stone steps leading to massive wooden doors. Maylin stood at the bottom of those steps, clutching her folder of sheet music, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. People pushed past her, students carrying instrument cases, professors with armloads of books, visitors studying campus maps. No one gave her a second glance. Here she was just another young musician, not the homeless piano prodigy from the newspaper article. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, hearing her mother's voice in her head. Taking a deep breath, she climbed the steps. Inside, the building was even more impressive. High ceilings with intricate plasterwork, polished wooden floors that amplified every footstep, and the distant sounds of various instruments being practiced in far-off rooms. A mixture of Bach, jazz scales, and vocal exercises floated through the hallways. Maylin checked the small paper Professor Chen had given her over the phone. Audition room 3, second floor. She found the staircase and made her way up. The second-floor hallway was lined with practice rooms. Through the small windows in each door, she could see students bent over pianos, violins, cellos, and other instruments. They all looked so confident, so at home. Maylin felt like an imposter, as if at any moment someone would stop her and ask what she thought she was doing there. Room 3 had a sign on the door. Auditions in progress. Please wait to be called. Several students sat in chairs along the wall outside, some reviewing sheet music, others with eyes closed, fingers moving silently as they mentally practiced their pieces. Maylin took the last empty chair and waited. One by one, the students were called in. Each emerged about 15 minutes later, some looking relieved, others disappointed. Finally, a woman with a clipboard opened the door and called, "Maylin Chang?" The audition room contained a grand piano, even nicer than the one at Bellini's, and a long table where 3 people sat. Professor Chen and 2 others she didn't recognize. a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and a younger man with glasses. Mei Lin, thank you for coming, Professor Chen said. These are my colleagues, Professor Wilson and Dr. Aoki. They'll be helping evaluate your performance today. The woman nodded politely. The younger man gave her a small smile. Neither seemed particularly impressed yet. What will you be playing for us today? Professor Wilson asked, pen poised over a notepad. I'll start with Bach's Prelude in C major, then Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, first movement, and finish with Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. The last one had been her mother's most challenging piece, one they had worked on together for years. Dr. Aoki's eyebrows raised slightly. It was an ambitious program. Whenever you're ready, he said. Mei Lin sat at the piano and took a moment to adjust the bench. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes briefly, and began to play. The Bach flowed from her fingers, the familiar patterns comforting her. She had played this piece since she was 9 years old. Her mother had used it to teach her about mathematical precision in music. Bach is like beautiful architecture, she would say. Every note has its exact place. As she moved into the Beethoven, Mei Lin felt herself relax. The room around her faded away. There was only the music, the piano, and the memories of her mother guiding her through each phrase. Beethoven speaks directly to the heart, her mother had told her. Don't just play the notes, feel them. By the time she reached the Chopin, Mei Lin was no longer thinking about the audition. This piece had been her mother's favorite, the one she had played at her final recital before leaving China. Mei Lin poured everything into it, her grief, her fear, her hope, her determination. Her fingers flew across the keys during the difficult passages, then gentled for the more lyrical sections. When the final notes faded away, she was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away and turned to face the panel. All three professors were staring at her with identical expressions of astonishment. Professor Wilson's pen was frozen above her notepad. Dr. Aoki's mouth was slightly open. Professor Chen was smiling, his eyes bright with what looked like unshed tears. Well, Professor Wilson said finally, clearing her throat. That was extraordinary. Your technique needs refinement, Dr. Aoki said. But your musicality, he shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. What my colleagues are trying to say, Professor Chen said gently, is that you play with a rare combination of technical skill and emotional depth. It's something that can't be taught. They asked her questions then, about her training, her experience, her knowledge of music theory. Mei Lin answered honestly, explaining how her mother had been her only teacher, how they had worked through music theory books together at their kitchen table, how they had listened to recordings of the great pianists and discussed interpretation. And your sight reading? Dr. Aoki asked. How would you rate it? It's good, Mei Lin said. My mother insisted on daily sight reading practice. Professor Wilson slid a piece of sheet music across the table. Would you mind? It was a piece Mei Lin had never seen before, something modern with unusual time signatures and chord progressions. She took it to the piano, studied it for a moment, then began to play. It wasn't perfect. She hesitated at a few tricky passages, but she made it through without stopping. When she finished, the professors exchanged glances. Professor Chen nodded slightly and Professor Wilson made a note on her pad. Thank you, Mei Lin, Professor Chen said. We have a few more auditions today, but we'll be in touch very soon. Outside the audition room, Mei Lin leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The emotional intensity of playing her mother's favorite pieces, combined with the stress of the audition, had drained her. She wasn't sure if she'd done well enough, but she had given it everything she had. She was heading toward the stairs when she heard someone call her name. Turning, she saw Professor Chen hurrying after her. Mei Lin, wait, he said. I wanted to tell you. Your mother would have been very proud today. The simple statement, delivered with such sincerity, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. There's something else. He glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. I can't officially tell you the committee's decision yet, but you should prepare yourself for good news. Very good news. 3 days later, the official letter arrived at Bellini's. Diane handed it to her with barely contained excitement. It came by courier, she said. Open it! With trembling fingers, Mei Lin broke the seal. Dear Ms. Cheng, she read aloud. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to the Conservatory's Special Talent Program with a full scholarship covering tuition, books, and materials. She couldn't read further. Diane wrapped her in a hug, both of them laughing and crying at once. "There's more," Maylin said, scanning the rest of the letter. "They want me to perform in the new student showcase next month, and they're assigning me to study directly with Professor Chen." That night, after her regular performance at Bellini's, a young woman approached her. She was about Maylin's age, stylishly dressed with a confident air. "I'm Zoe," she said. "I'm a student at the conservatory. Dr. Aoki is my advisor. He told us about your audition, said it was the most moving thing he'd heard in years." Maylin blushed. "He did?" "Absolutely. Everyone's talking about you." Zoe smiled. "I play cello. I'm in the chamber music program. We should get together sometime, maybe play together." It was the first time since her mother's death that another young musician had reached out to her. "I'd like that," Maylin said, returning the smile. Later, as she climbed the stairs to her room above the restaurant, Maylin felt a strange mixture of emotions. She was excited about the conservatory, nervous about meeting new people, and sad at the thought of leaving Bellini's, which had become a kind of home. In her room, she went to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was her future. Classes, performances, new friends, new challenges. It was everything her mother had wanted for her. Everything she had once thought was lost forever. She took out her mother's letter and read it again. "Follow the music wherever it leads you. I will be listening. I'm following it, Mom," she whispered. "I hope you can hear." The first day of classes at the conservatory arrived more quickly than Maylin could have imagined. Summer had slipped away in a blur of preparation, shopping for appropriate clothes with Diane's help, reading through the textbooks Professor Chen had lent her, and continuing her nightly performances at Bellini's, which now attracted crowds of music lovers who had read about her in the newspaper. Standing outside the main building with her new backpack and folder of sheet music, Maylin felt like an imposter again. Students streamed past her, greeting friends they hadn't seen over the summer, comparing schedules, laughing about shared experiences. They all seemed to belong here in a way she wasn't sure she ever would. "Hey, piano girl!" Maylin turned to see Zoe hurrying toward her, cello case strapped to her back, waving enthusiastically. "I was hoping I'd find you," Zoe said, slightly out of breath. "First days are always overwhelming." "Want to walk in together?" Relief flooded through Maylin. "Yes, please. I have no idea where I'm going. Let me see your schedule." Zoe examined the paper Maylin handed her. "Perfect. We have music theory together first period. And look, you're in the advanced piano master class. That's usually only for third and fourth year students." Maylin's stomach tightened with anxiety. "That must be a mistake." "No mistake," said a familiar voice behind them. Professor Chen approached, carrying a stack of books. "I personally placed you there, Maylin. Your technical skills are already at that level." "But I've never even had formal lessons," Maylin protested. Professor Chen smiled, "Which makes it all the more remarkable. Trust me, you belong there." As he walked away, Zoe gave a low whistle. "Wow, Chen never gives compliments like that." "You really must be something special." "I'm really not," Maylin said, embarrassed. "I just had a good teacher in my mom." "Well, my mom tried to teach me to bake, and I still burn cookies every time," Zoe said with a laugh. "Come on, we're going to be late." The music theory classroom was already half full when they arrived. Maylin followed Zoe to 2 empty seats near the back. As they settled in, Maylin noticed several students glancing her way, whispering to each other. Her face burned. They knew who she was, the homeless girl from the newspaper. The professor, an older woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, called the class to order. "Welcome to Advanced Music Theory. I'm Dr. Powell. We'll start with a simple assessment to see what you all remember from last year." She handed out papers with exercises on chord progressions, time signatures, and other theoretical concepts. Maylin stared at hers, panic rising in her chest. She'd never taken a formal test on music theory before. Her mother had taught her these concepts organically, through playing, not through academic exercises. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to work through the problems. Some were easy, identifying chord progressions, marking measures. Others made her pause and think, trying to remember what her mother had taught her. By the time Dr. Powell called time, Maylin had answered everything, but she had no idea if her answers were correct. As the papers were passed forward, Zoe leaned over. "That was tough. I'm pretty sure I bombed the atonal section. I'm not even sure I understand what atonal means in this context, Mei Lin whispered back. Zoe's eyes widened. Seriously? We spent half of last year on it. Before Mei Lin could respond, Dr. Powell was speaking again, explaining the semester's curriculum. It was filled with terms and concepts that seemed foreign: post-tonal theory, set theory, 12-tone technique. Mei Lin wrote everything down frantically, already feeling lost. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of syllabi, introductions, and increasingly complex musical concepts. By lunchtime, Mei Lin's head was spinning. She followed Zoe to the cafeteria, where they found a table near the window. "So, what do you think so far?" Zoe asked, opening her lunch bag. "I think I'm in way over my head," Mei Lin admitted. "Everyone else seems to know so much already." "That's just because most of us have been here for years," Zoe said. "You're jumping in midstream." "But Professor, Chen wouldn't have put you in these advanced classes if he didn't think you could handle it. Maybe he made a mistake." "Chen doesn't make mistakes about musical talent." Zoe took a bite of her sandwich. "What's your next class?" Mei Lin checked her schedule. "Advanced Piano Masterclass, Room 215, that's the performance hall." Master classes are a big deal, open to all music students to observe. Mei Lin nearly choked on her water. "What? I thought it would be a small class." "Nope. Each student performs and then the professor critiques them in front of everyone. It's terrifying but amazing for learning." Zoe checked her watch. "We should go. You don't want to be late." The performance hall was a miniature version of a concert hall, with a stage at the front and seating for about 100 people. It was already filling with students when Mei Lin arrived. She spotted a sign near the stage. "Master class performers, please check in with Professor Wei." A severe-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses stood near the piano, checking names off a list. When Mei Lin gave her name, he looked up sharply. "Ah, the famous Ms. Chang," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. "Professor Chen has told us about you. You'll perform third today." "What should I play?" Mei Lin asked nervously. Professor Wei raised an eyebrow. "You didn't prepare anything?" "This is a master class, Ms. Chang, not an impromptu performance at a restaurant." Mei Lin's face burned with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Play whatever you auditioned with," he said curtly, turning to the next student. Mei Lin found a seat in the front row, her heart pounding. She hadn't brought her audition music. She would have to play from memory. As the first student took the stage, a confident-looking young man who launched into a complex Liszt piece, Mei Lin closed her eyes, mentally reviewing the notes of her Chopin piece. The first two performances were technically flawless. Both students played difficult pieces with precision and skill. After each performance, Professor Wei offered detailed critiques, pointing out minor flaws that Mei Lin hadn't even noticed. The audience of students listened attentively, some taking notes. "Next, Mei Lin Chang," Professor Wei announced. Her legs felt like jelly as she walked to the piano. She could feel everyone watching her, the homeless girl, the charity case, the one who didn't belong. She sat at the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she feared she would forget everything. Then she thought of her mother, of their small apartment filled with music, of the hours they had spent together at their old piano. She began to play. The Chopin ballad flowed from her fingers just as it had in her audition. She lost herself in the music, forgetting the audience, the pressure, the fear. This piece had been her mother's favorite, and playing it made her feel like her mother was with her again, guiding her hands as she had so many times before. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than for the previous performers. Mei Lin stood and gave a small bow, her cheeks flushed. Professor Wei waited for the applause to die down. His expression remained serious, but there was something different in his eyes now. "Your technique needs work," he began. "Your left hand is sometimes too heavy in the bass runs. Your pedaling could be more precise." He paused. "But your interpretation, it's not something I can teach. You understand this piece in your soul, not just your mind. That's rare." It wasn't exactly praise, but Mei Lin felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe she did belong here after all. After class, several students approached her, introducing themselves, complimenting her playing. A tall boy with glasses who had performed first shook her hand. "That was amazing," he said. "I'm Luis. I've been studying piano since I was 4, and I've never played Chopin like that." "Thanks," Mei Lin said, smiling shyly. Your list was incredible. Technically, maybe, Louise shrugged. But music should make people feel something, not just impress them with speed and accuracy. You made everyone feel something. By the end of the day, Maylene's fear had been replaced by cautious hope. Yes, she had a lot to learn. Yes, she was behind in music theory and historical knowledge. But when it came to the piano itself, to making music that touched people, she could hold her own. That evening, as she prepared for her performance at Bellini's, Diane noticed a difference in her. "You look happier," she said. "Good first day?" "Hard," Maylene admitted. "Scary, but also right, like I'm where I'm supposed to be." She played with special feeling that night, thinking of how far she had come from that rainy evening when she'd first walked into the restaurant, hungry and desperate. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles, failures, moments of doubt. But for the first time since losing her mother, Maylene felt like she had a future again, one filled with music. And somewhere, somehow, she knew her mother was listening. 3 months had passed since Maylene's first day at the conservatory. The crisp autumn air had given way to winter's chill, and the campus buildings stood outlined against gray skies. Inside those buildings, though, Maylene had found a warmth she hadn't expected, the warmth of belonging. It hadn't been easy. The theory classes still challenged her. Hours spent in the library, studying concepts her classmates had learned years ago, left her exhausted. Some nights she would return to her room above Bellini's with her head pounding, wondering if she would ever catch up. But at the piano, she soared. Her weekly lessons with Professor Chen had transformed her playing. He didn't try to change her style or emotional connection to the music, but instead focused on refining her technique, teaching her new approaches to difficult passages, helping her understand the history and context behind each piece. "You play from the heart," he told her during their last lesson of the semester. "Many students take years to learn what you do naturally. Now you're gaining the technical foundation to support that gift." Today was the day of the winter showcase, where selected students would perform for the public, including critics, music lovers, and representatives from symphonies and recording companies. Only 12 students had been chosen from the entire conservatory. Maylene was one of them. She stood backstage in the concert hall, peering through a gap in the curtain at the filling seats. Her stomach churned with nerves. "I think I'm going to be sick," she whispered. Zoe, who was performing a cello piece later in the program, squeezed her shoulder. "You'll be amazing." "You always are." "But this isn't Bellini's," Maylene said. "These people are expecting perfection." "No," said Louise, who had become a good friend over the past months. "They're expecting music. Real music. That's what you give them." Professor Chen appeared, checking on his students before the performance. "Maylene, you're opening the program. Are you ready?" She wasn't, not really, but she nodded anyway. "Remember," he said quietly, "play for her." He didn't need to explain who he meant. Maylene nodded again, this time with more confidence. The lights dimmed in the hall. The dean of the conservatory stepped onto the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the program. Then he announced, "Our first performer this evening is a remarkable new talent, a first-year student who has already captured the attention of our faculty. Please welcome Maylene Chung performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, First Movement." It was a piece she had been working on for weeks, far more challenging than anything she had played before. Professor Chen had pushed her toward it, believing she was ready for its emotional complexity and technical demands. As she walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded her. She couldn't see the audience, just felt their presence. Hundreds of people watching, waiting. She sat at the grand piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The opening chords of the Rachmaninoff rumbled from the piano, dark and powerful. As the piece progressed, her initial nervousness fell away. The music took over, sweeping her along like a river. Her fingers found the keys without conscious thought, shaped the phrases as if the music were a living thing she was bringing to life. She thought of her mother, of their tiny apartment, of the hours spent at their old upright piano. She thought of the rainy night she had walked into Bellini's hungry and desperate. She thought of Professor Chen's belief in her, of Zoe's friendship, of all the paths that had led her to this moment. The final chords resonated through the hall, then faded into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the audience erupted in applause. As Maylene's eyes adjusted to the lights, she could see people standing, their faces alight with emotion. She rose and bowed, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and joy. As she left the stage, Professor Chen was waiting in the wings, his eyes bright. That, he said simply, was extraordinary. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. Maylin watched her friends perform. Zoe played beautifully, her cello singing with rich, mournful tones, and Luis gave a technically flawless performance of a Debussy piece. Each student brought something unique to the stage, a reminder of the many different ways music could touch the heart. After the final performance, the lobby filled with audience members, students, and faculty mingling over glasses of sparkling cider and small plates of food. Maylin stood with Zoe and Luis accepting congratulations from classmates and strangers alike. Maylin Chang. She turned to see a tall woman in an elegant black suit. The woman extended her hand. "I'm Patricia Reynolds from the National Symphony Orchestra. Your performance was remarkable. I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity we have for young artists." Maylin felt dizzy. The National Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. "What kind of opportunity?" she managed to ask. "We have a young soloist program, performances with the orchestra, mentorship with our musicians. It's very selective." Ms. Reynolds handed her a card. "Call me next week. We'd like to hear more of your playing." As Ms. Reynolds moved away, Zoe gripped Maylin's arm. "Did that just happen? Did you just get recruited by the National Symphony?" "I think so." Maylin stared at the card in her hand. "Is this real?" "It's real," said Professor Chen, who had approached without them noticing. "And well-deserved. Patricia doesn't extend invitations lightly." The next person to approach was a surprise, Professor Wei, whose master classes still terrified most students. He rarely attended student showcases. "Ms. Chang," he said formally, "your Rachmaninoff was moving. You've made remarkable progress this semester." Coming from Professor Wei, it was the highest praise. "Thank you," Maylin said. "I've been working very hard. It shows." He hesitated, then added, "Your mother would be proud." The words hit her like a physical force. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. "You knew my mother." "I heard her play many years ago when she performed with the Shanghai Philharmonic. She had the same gift you have, the ability to make the audience feel the music, not just hear it." He gave a small nod, almost a bow, then walked away. Later that night, after the excitement had faded, Maylin made her way back to Bellini's. The restaurant was closed. Diane had given everyone the night off to attend the showcase, but the lights were still on. When Maylin entered, she found Diane sitting at a table with a small cake in front of her. "Celebration time," Diane said, smiling. "The restaurant's piano prodigy is becoming a star." Maylin shook her head. "I'm not a star. I'm just a student who had a good night. And modest, too." Diane lit the candles on the cake. "Make a wish." Maylin closed her eyes. What did she wish for? Not fame or success or even recognition, just to keep playing. To keep feeling the music, to keep her mother's spirit alive through every note. She blew out the candles. "So," Diane said, cutting the cake, "what happens next?" Maylin told her about Ms. Reynolds and the National Symphony program. If it works out, I'd be performing with them next summer, and they'd help arrange other concerts, maybe even some recording sessions. "That's amazing," Diane said. "You know you'll always have a home here, right? No matter how famous you get." "I know." Maylin smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the cake or the cozy restaurant. "None of this would have happened without you. Without that night you let me play. You did all the work," Diane said. "I just opened a door." Later, in her small room above the restaurant, Maylin sat by the window looking out at the city lights. 6 months ago, she had been homeless, hopeless, with nothing but her memories and her mother's teachings. Now she had friends, mentors, opportunities she had never dreamed of. She took out her mother's photo and the letter she had found. "I'm following the music, Mom," she whispered. "Just like you said to do." The next morning, she would return to the practice rooms at the conservatory. There would be new pieces to learn, new challenges to face, new heights to reach. The journey ahead would have its struggles. Music was not an easy path. But she wasn't walking it alone anymore. And when she sat at the piano, her fingers touching the keys, her mother's spirit would be there with her in every note, every phrase, every moment of beauty she created. That night, Maylin dreamed of playing on a vast stage, the music soaring around her like wings. In the dream, she looked out at the audience and saw her mother in the front row, smiling, applauding. her face radiant with pride. It wasn't just a dream, Mei Lin realized when she woke. It was a promise, a future that had begun with a simple question on a rainy night. Can I play for a piece of food? The answer had changed her life forever.